I had $47,000 in my savings account. By every financial guru's standard, I was winning, but I was sitting on a mattress on the floor, wearing shoes with holes in the soles, and I hadn't seen my friends in 6 months. I had sacrificed my entire 20s to hoard paper, only to wake up one morning and realize I had nothing of actual value. Hi, I'm Daniel Brooks, and you're watching Wealthic Voyage. Today, we're diving into the toxic side of personal finance, the dark psychology of extreme saving, and the massive mistake I made by confusing security with a prison sentence. Let me ask you a question, and I want you to really sit with it. Are you saving money for a better life, or are you just using saving money to avoid living your life right now? Why do we feel this immense, crushing guilt every time we spend $1 on ourselves? Have you ever bought something you genuinely wanted, maybe a nice dinner, a concert ticket, or a new jacket, and instead of enjoying it, your brain immediately started calculating how many hours you had to work to pay for it? Why does money feel like a moral test? I'll tell you why. Because the financial industry, the internet, and society at large have sold us a very specific, very dangerous brand of morality. They've convinced us that suffering equals virtue. They've told us that if we aren't in pain, we aren't doing it right. But what if I told you that extreme frugality isn't a wealth-building strategy? What if it's actually just an anxiety management technique? Let me take you back to how this all started for me, so you can see how easily the trap snaps shut. When I was 22, I graduated college with $32,000 in student loan debt and an entry-level job paying $38,000 a year. I was terrified. The weight of that debt felt like a physical boulder sitting on my chest. So, I did what any rational, scared person would do. I went into survival mode. I moved into the cheapest apartment I could find. It had mold in the bathroom and a neighbor who played loud music at 2 a.m., but it was $650 a month. I bought a $50 bike off Craigslist to commute to work, even in the dead of winter. I ate rice, beans, and frozen vegetables every single day. For 2 years, I didn't buy a single cup of coffee. I didn't go to a single movie. When my friends went out for drinks, I'd make up an excuse about working late, because the idea of spending $15 on 2 beers made my stomach physically turn. And here is the crazy part. It worked. By age 25, I had completely obliterated my $32,000 in student loans. I felt like a god. I had conquered the enemy. I was financially disciplined. I was a warrior. But there is a psychological concept called the scarcity mindset. When you live in scarcity for long enough, your brain actually physically rewires itself. You stop seeing abundance as a possibility. Your brain's default setting becomes, there is never enough. So, when the debt disappeared, I didn't stop the extreme saving. I just shifted the target. Phase 1 was survival. Phase 2 was hoarding. I told myself, I don't have debt anymore, but I need an emergency fund. I need a down payment for a house. I need retirement money. All of those things are true. You do need those things. But my approach was completely devoid of logic. It was entirely driven by fear. Let me give you a real-life example of how absurd my life became. My laptop, the one I used for work, was 7 years old. The battery was dead, so it had to be plugged in constantly. The hinge was broken, so I had to prop it up with a stack of books. It took 10 minutes just to boot up. I was losing hours of productivity every week because of this machine. A new, reliable laptop that would make me faster at my job cost $1,200. I had $20,000 in the bank at this point, but I refused to buy it. Why? Because in my scarcity-brained mind, spending $1,200 meant losing $1,200. I couldn't see the return on investment. I could only see the money leaving my account. So, I suffered. I wasted hours of my life staring at a loading screen, all to protect a number in a bank account that I was literally terrified to use. Do you see the irony? I was valuing dead paper over my own living, breathing time. This is where the financial mistake becomes a life mistake. Because I was so obsessed with cutting expenses, I completely ignored the other side of the wealth equation, increasing my income. I was so proud of saving $5 a day by meal prepping bland food that I didn't even consider spending $200 on a certification course that could have bumped my salary up by $10,000 a year. I was playing microeconomics with my life while completely ignoring macroeconomics. I was the guy who would spend 3 hours driving around town to save 4 cents a gallon on gas, burning $5 worth of my time and $2 worth of gas in the process. But in my twisted math, I was winning because I didn't swipe my card. The financial gurus will tell you, a penny saved is a penny earned. Let me be brutally honest with you. That is a lie told by people who want to keep you poor. A penny saved is just a penny saved, but a penny invested in your skills is 10 pennies earned. But I was blind to this. I was high on the dopamine of watching my savings account balance go up. It felt safe. It felt like a shield against the world. And then, the shield shattered. I was 27 years old. I had managed to save $47,000. And then, my dad had a stroke. I lived 800 miles away from my parents. I got the call at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I dropped everything, packed a bag, and had to book a last-minute flight. Do you know what extreme frugality prepares you for in a moment of absolute crisis? Absolutely nothing, because while I had $47,000 in a high-yield savings account earning 4% interest, I had zero life infrastructure. I didn't have a credit card with a high limit because I thought credit cards were evil. I had literally one card with a $1,500 limit that I paid off every month for gas. When I tried to book the flight, it was $600. My card got declined. Not because I didn't have the money in my checking account, but because the bank's fraud algorithm flagged the sudden, massive purchase. Because I never used the card. I had to sit on the phone with the bank for an hour, crying, trying to prove I was me, just to buy a ticket to go see my dying father. When I finally got to the hospital, I was a mess. Not just emotionally, but practically. I had to take 3 weeks off work. Because I had spent the last 5 years refusing to invest in my career, I didn't have paid time off. I was an independent contractor. No work meant no income. Because I had refused to buy a reliable car, I had to rely on my mom, who was dealing with her husband in the ICU, to drive me everywhere. Because I had isolated myself from all my friends to save money, I had no support system to call and vent to. I was sitting in a hospital cafeteria, staring at a $47,000 bank balance on my phone, and I have never felt more poor, more helpless, or more alone in my entire life. That moment in the cafeteria broke me. But it also woke me up. It forced me to ask the most important question of my life. What is the actual point of money? Is the point to stare at a number, or is the point to use that number to buy back your time, your comfort, and your dignity when life inevitably punches you in the face? I had spent 5 years treating money like a museum exhibit. You don't touch museum exhibits. You just look at them behind glass. But money is a tool. It's a hammer. You don't buy a hammer to put it on a shelf. You buy a hammer to build a house. I had $47,000 in hammers, and I was living in a cardboard box. When I got back home from that trip, I fired my old financial identity. I completely rewired my approach to money. And I want to share the 3 pillars of that new philosophy with you, because if you are stuck in the scarcity trap, this will save you years of your life. Pillar 1. You must aggressively buy back your time. Time is the only non-renewable resource you have. You can make more money. You cannot make more time. Once I realized this, I walked into my apartment and did an audit of my life. What was I doing that I hated, that I could pay someone else to do? I was spending 4 hours every Saturday cleaning my apartment, doing laundry and grocery shopping. I hated it. It drained my soul. I hired a cleaning service. It cost me $120 a month. The old me would have had a heart attack, but the new me looked at it mathematically. I was effectively paying someone $120 to give me 16 hours of my life back every month. That is paying $7.50 an hour to buy back my own life. That is the greatest ROI on the planet. I used those 16 hours to start a side hustle. That side hustle eventually replaced my full-time income. If I hadn't spent that $120, I would still be sitting in that empty apartment. Pillar 2. Shift your focus from cutting costs to increasing your income. You cannot save your way to wealth. It is mathematically impossible. There is a hard ceiling on how much you can cut. You cannot cut your expenses below zero, but there is no ceiling on how much you can earn. I took $1,500 of my sacred savings account, the money I used to worship, and I bought a masterclass in a high-income digital skill. I spent 100 hours learning it. Within 6 months, I leveraged that skill to negotiate a $20,000 raise at my day job, and I doubled my freelance rates. That $2,500 expense turned into $40,000 of extra income over the next 2 years. When you invest in yourself, the return isn't 4% like a savings account, it's infinite. Pillar 3. Redefine wasting money as strategic spending. This was the hardest habit to break. I had to teach my brain that spending money on things that improved my mental health, my physical health, or my relationships was not a weakness. It was a necessity. I joined a gym. I started buying higher quality food that actually gave me energy, instead of the cheap, processed stuff that made me sluggish. I started flying out to see my friends once a year, no questions asked. Yes, my savings account stopped growing as fast. It actually went down for a few months while I upgraded my life. And you know what happened? Nothing bad happened. The world didn't end. The financial gods didn't strike me down with lightning. Instead, I got stronger. I got happier. I became a better friend, a better son, and a better worker. My life actually became rich instead of just my bank account, which brings me to the ultimate takeaway. The life lesson I want you to write down and look at every single day. There is a massive difference between being cheap and being wealthy. Being cheap is saying no to everything because you are terrified of the future. Being wealthy is saying yes to the right things because you are confident in your ability to create more money. If you are sitting there right now, hoarding every penny, wearing clothes you hate, driving a car you're embarrassed of, and telling yourself you're just being responsible, I need you to stop. You are not being responsible. You are punishing yourself for a future that hasn't happened yet. Money is meant to be a bridge to a better life, not a wall that locks you inside a miserable one. Stop fearing the expense. Start demanding the return. Buy the laptop that makes you faster. Buy the course that makes you smarter. Buy the plane ticket that keeps you connected to the people you love. Protect your future, yes, but do not sacrifice your present to do it, because if you wait until you have enough to start living, you will wake up one day with a full bank account and an empty life. Spend your money on a life you actually want to live. That is the truest form of wealth there is. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this message woke something up inside you, share it with someone who might be trapped in the scarcity mindset. Hit that subscribe button and keep building a life worth paying for.